Sometimes, the most terrifying monsters don't lurk in the shadows. They smile at you in line at the grocery store, hold the door open at the gas station, ask you for directions with a voice as calm as anyone you've ever met. You laugh, you chat, you walk away, never realizing you just came face to face with a monster. Someone who's taken lives, someone who might do it again. We go about our lives trusting that the people we pass are harmless, that a friendly face means nothing more than a passing moment. But sometimes, it means something else entirely. A chance meeting with a killer, a smile from someone who's already taken a life. And the most chilling part of these interactions is that you never even knew. Let's take a closer look at some of these true stories with this trip into the dark tunnel. As a youngster, my parents told me the time my father met Ted Bundy. He was walking into my mom's workplace as Bundy was walking out. They exchanged pleasantries, and Bundy shook my father's hand. Bundy said he was working for a farmer in a town about 20 miles away. This struck my father as odd because Bundy was wearing a long wool coat and his hands were baby soft smooth, not the hands or attire of a farmhand. There were announcements in the 70s warning residents that he may be in the area. We live very close to Colorado. It was an interesting story. When I was nearly 40, I was at a birthday party for a friend and afterward went to her house for some homemade food. She was telling me of when she was a criminal justice student in college and wrote her thesis on Ted Bundy. She said some of her material came from the police reports from when Bundy attacked my mom, which took me by surprise. So I decided to talk to my parents about it. My mom worked at a Montgomery ward in those days and was working there alone that day. Bundy came in and pulled her to a back room and dragged her to the ground. She said she started kicking and hitting him as hard as she could, fighting for her life. After a while, he got up, pointed at her, and said he was going to go get lunch and then come back for her, and then left. It was around this time that he passed my dad coming in as Bundy was leaving. My mom looked like she could have been a sister to many of his victims. My father drove around with the local sheriff looking for him at several restaurants to no avail. Today, my father can't stand watching documentaries of Bundy, as he is often shown in that same wool coat and the same smug smile. My parents protected us kids from feeling like evil could be that close. Now, Ted Bundy is one of the most well-profiled serial killers in American history, so there's no need to go over the many documented horrors that he left behind. But sometimes, it's the smaller moments that reveal the true depth of the monster. Mere seconds after attempting to murder a woman, he was able to stand face-to-face with her husband, composed and smiling, and was able to shake his hand and just walk away like it was another random meeting. That's what made Bundy so terrifying. It wasn't just his sheer inhumanity, but it was the ease with which he was able to wear humanity like a costume. He wasn't one when I met him. Worked a retail job that sold iPhones at a high-end mall. Guy comes in carrying a Nordstrom bag, wearing Gucci sunglasses, and asks to buy an iPhone. While I waited for our back-of-house team to bring the iPhone, I'm making casual conversation with the guy. I ask what he does for work, says he's an actor. I ask if he's been in anything I might have seen. He says The Hunger Games. I say, cool, who did you play? He mumbles something about being one of the tributes. The conversation somehow leads to him asking if I'm single. I told him I was engaged, and he became visibly annoyed. His attitude was very arrogant, and he did a lot of uncomfortable/creepy staring that I noticed after he took off his sunglasses. I had initially asked him if he was eligible for an upgrade on his phone, and he was confident that he was. Well, after checking his ID, which was standard protocol, and pulling up the account, nope, not eligible. But his brother's phone was eligible. He insists that he can use his brother's upgrade, but I tell him that stuff like this needs to be approved by the main account holder/authorized users, so he calls his stepmom and asks to use the brother's upgrade. His stepmom says no, and the guy throws a complete tantrum, saying that his brother is too young for an iPhone anyway, that he's fine using an older model, that he needs a new phone. Stepmom doesn't budge, yet I'm stuck here for at least 20 minutes while this guy yells at his stepmom, trying desperately to get his way. He leaves in a huff, and I'm so relieved to get away from this entitled prick. The guy was Elliot Rodger. Sometimes, the monsters we fear don't storm into our lives with violence and chaos. Sometimes they walk in quietly, frustrated over a phone, irritated by a wait, lashing out in subtle ways that feel off, but not enough to set off alarms. She didn't meet a killer that day, not yet. She met a man with a temper, a bruised ego, and a strange hostility that left her uneasy. And like many of us would, she brushed it off as just another bad customer. But hindsight can be cruel, because it's only after the headlines that cover their monstrous actions that we look back and realize we had a brush with something darker. Not all of us will meet monsters at their worst. Some of us just meet them while the monster is still sleeping within. My mom once told us about a suspected run-in she had with Clifford Olson. She was around 13 years old, walking home from swim club, and a man matching his description pulled up alongside her and tried to strike up a conversation. He would ask her where the post office was located and said he needed some help mailing a present. My mom was smart enough to realize it was Labor Day and the post office was closed. She saw he had plates on his car from the US and had leather gloves on. When she finally worked up the courage to end the conversation and walk away, the man started swearing at her, telling her to get in the car, and then he sped off. The dates and locations all add up to really freaky stuff. I asked my mom for more information, but she pretty much told me the same story. She ran off the sidewalk into the park across the street to get away from him and didn't stop till she got home. She never reported it to the police, but told my grandparents about the encounter. She wasn't allowed to walk home from swim club anymore, and the parents set up carpooling programs for the group. Clifford Olson, the Beast of British Columbia, was finally arrested in 1981 on Vancouver Island on suspicion of trying to abduct 2 teenage girls. He committed 11 known murders of children and teenagers in a little over a year, with countless assaults before and during his spree. They found the decomposing body of a 13-year-old girl a few weeks after this encounter within an hour of my mother's house, and the body was later linked to Olson. She never learned his name that day, and never knew how close she'd come to becoming another lost child. It was him, Clifford Olson, one of Canada's most depraved serial killers, and she had stood just feet away. Sometimes, it's really terrifying realizing just how narrowly you escaped. I was in Baton Rouge during the early 2000s when Derek Todd Lee was active in the city. At the time, I was dating a girl who roughly fit the physical profile of his victims. She was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle who lived in a mansion on the LSU Lakes, and one evening calls me while driving back to their house from errands, and she is crying. "There's someone following me. A white pickup truck." At this point, the suspect was believed to be driving exactly this. I've started driving around in circles, and it's still following me. I grabbed my roommate, and we were out the door. He drove and made the 20-minute drive to her aunt's house in 8 minutes. When we were approaching the interstate exit, I called her and told her to head to the house. She was freaking out. He was still behind her, but she got to the house and ran inside. A minute later, we pull up just as 2 houses down, on the opposite side of the street, a white pickup parks. I run inside and check on her, and she confirms that it is that truck that's been following her. I ask my roommate to get my back and head out there, go give a rap to the hood of the truck, and trying my best to look and sound intimidating, I just stare the driver down and say, "You gotta get out of here, buddy. I don't know what you want, but you gotta get out of here." The driver nervously eyes me and drives off. I'm thinking, another stupid LSU student, a misunderstanding. She lost track of the car following her, and this is just some guy parking here just a few houses down from the famed Submarine Races parking spot on the lakes. I didn't see the guy again in person, but I recognized him when I saw him nearly a year later when the cops perp-walked Derek Todd Lee, arresting him as the Baton Rouge serial killer. I saw the man I made eye contact with that night and realized what I stopped and how I didn't take seriously someone who was capable of murder many times over. Derek Todd Lee would go on to murder at least 7 women between the years of 1998 and 2003. But not that night, and not her. Not because he changed his mind, but because someone stood in his way. The man at the truck never knew who he was staring down, and Lee simply vanished into the dark. Sometimes, the difference between life and death is a locked door, or just a friend with good instincts. And luckily for her that night, evil was interrupted. My sister-in-law, Kathy, who is from Darwin, Australia, decided to take a road trip to the East Coast for her high school graduation present. Her parents were very strict and protective, so they made her older brother, Robert, come along on the trip. The year was 1990. A few nights into the trip, Kathy and her brother are having a little dinner by the campfire consisting of jerky, chips, and beer. They are stargazing as they eat, so they were startled when they realized that a man is approaching them. He looks like a ranger, so Kathy gets up, anticipating that he is going to tell them to leave. Instead, he just says, "Beautiful night." Kathy and the ranger, who she refers to as Crocodile Dundee of the bushland, since he never introduced himself, hit it off immediately. He points out some constellations in the sky. When Kathy tells him that she and her brother are on a road trip, he gives her suggestions for some trails and even a cave she might explore on her trip. He never insists on bumming any beer or food off of them. He just seems content to relax by the fire and chat. He smiles a lot, and he reminds Kathy of one of her Greek uncles, except the stranger is taller. The whole time Kathy and the stranger are talking, Robert is holding his beer can in his left hand instead of his right, which he never does. Kathy realizes that Robert is keeping his right hand free in case he needs to grab the rifle at his feet. Eventually, the stranger gets up and tells them that his campsite is up ahead and that he is making rabbit stew. He invites them to join him. Robert, who has said nothing the whole time Kathy and the stranger were talking, quickly says, "We're fine, thanks." Crocodile Dundee of the bushland gives a nonplussed shrug, tells Kathy goodnight, and heads back to his campsite. Crocodile Dundee of the bushland was Ivan Milat. 2 things really creep Kathy out about the encounter, in retrospect. 1. Kathy said that Wolf Creek did not do Malat justice. The film made his character overly sinister, and she says in reality, what made Malat so scary is that he could easily make someone feel at ease. He was charming and knowledgeable, like a rugged uncle. And 2, and most importantly, had Kathy been by herself that night, she would have joined Malat for rabbit stew, and it haunts her sometimes to think what would have happened. Ivan Malat is remembered as one of Australia's most brutal serial killers. But not every brush with him ended in blood. Sometimes he was just a man with a crooked smile and a casual charm. Easy to laugh with, easy to underestimate, and that was part of the danger. He knew how to put people at ease, how to hide the violence behind the grin. To some, he was nothing more than a strange but funny guy met on a quiet trail. Only later, sometimes years later, did they realize who they'd been talking to, and how close they'd come to never leaving that wilderness at all. Not every encounter ends in blood. Sometimes, evil passes us by with a glance, a nod, even a laugh. No screams, no warnings, just a brush with something we'll never fully understand. It's easy to believe we'd recognize the face of a killer, but the truth is colder. Sometimes we shake their hand and move on with our lives, never realizing how close we came. Thank you for joining me on our first trip into the dark tunnel.